To Module 8 of the Legacy Holistic Health Coach Training Program. Now, in this module, we're going to jump right into making sure that we understand the body systems. But before we do, one little piece of trivia for you. How many bodies do we actually have? Is it A, just one? B, at least 7? It's the magic number. Or is it C? Is this a trick question? Well, I can tell you that the answer is not C. The answer is B. Believe it or not, we have several different bodies that do different things. We are the most familiar with our physical body, but today as we go through the body systems, we are going to touch just briefly on the other bodies that we actually have and how these bodies in a spiritual space can dictate or manifest different things in our physical body. So let's dive right in. The words for this particular module are breath and flow. Everything that we're going to be talking about today has everything to do with the way we breathe, our core organs, including the heart and the lungs, as well as the lymphatic system. So everything is all about breath and flow and how fluids flow in and out of the body. Now, we're going to be covering the science of body systems, and today we're going to be covering the circulatory, the respiratory, and the lymphatic system in detail. We're also going to be helping you to understand the signs and the symptoms of these different body systems and how things happen within these systems. The human body is the best picture of the human soul. I love this quote because it rings true for everything that's happening. It has been said that many things that manifest or happen in our physical body has a connection or an origin within our spiritual body. Now let's start with the circulatory system. Now the circulatory system consists of the cardiovascular system, which is the heart, and the lungs, which is the pulmonary system or how we breathe, and then the arteries and the veins, which is the systemic system that takes blood to the different parts of the body. The circulatory system has these three independent parts. Now, the system in itself is responsible for the flow of blood, nutrients, and oxygen and other gases, as well as hormones to and from the cells. Now, the average adult has about 5 to 6 quarts. That's anywhere between 4.7 to about 5.5 liters of blood as full volume in their body. Now, the blood is made up of plasma, red cells, white cells, and platelets, and we'll cover that in just a moment. The heart is a muscular organ that has 4 distinct chambers. Now, these chambers beat in sync with one another. For instance, the top chambers beat together, and then the lower chambers beat together. Anytime the beats are off or the chambers try to beat on their own, it is considered to be a dysrhythmia or an arrhythmia. It's located just behind and slightly left of the breastbone. To allow for room in the chest, you have one lung that is smaller than the other lung or has less tissue than the other lung. And the heart pumps blood through the network of arteries and veins. Now, arteries are usually depicted on the picture as red. And they take blood away from the heart out to the body. So in this particular photo, you can see my arrow on the screen. These are some major arteries that branch off of the body. Now, the only time that changes is when it comes to the pulmonary arteries and the pulmonary vein. And we'll discuss that a little bit here in just a moment. Now, the veins are depicted as purple or blue, and they take blood towards the heart. Blood comes into the heart through this large vein and through this large vein into the heart, through the chambers, and then over to the lungs so that it can pick up oxygen. Now, let's orient ourselves really quickly here. Anytime we're looking at something that is towards the top of the body or towards the head of the body, it can be known as cephalad. And anytime we're looking at something towards the foot of the body, it can be known as caudad. You may see these particular structures or these names used in, especially if you're helping to coach clients who are also patients of other doctors. Now, this picture gives you a great view of all the different structures on the heart, including the veins, the coronary arteries and veins that feed the main muscle of the heart to make sure that the chambers continue to pump blood. Now, remember we stated that arteries are red in color and take blood away from the heart and out to the body. And veins are blue in color and they bring blood from the body back to the heart. The only exception that happens is the pulmonary arteries, which are here, right and left pulmonary arteries, and they are blue. If you notice, they are blue. And so what happens is with these arteries being blue, they are actually taking blood to the lungs, right? They're still carrying unoxygenated blood, but the direction that they're flowing is different. The same is true for pulmonary veins. You'll notice that they're red because they're taking blood away from the body, away from the heart and out to the body. So blood is going to enter the heart through the pulmonary arteries, through the superior and inferior vena cava, and it's going to go into the heart through the chambers with one-way valves, and then it's going to go to the lungs. Now, after it picks up oxygen from the lungs, oxygen-rich blood is going to come back through the pulmonary veins, which are red because it's oxygen-rich blood it's carrying. And then it's going to go back through the heart, and then it's going to go out and up to the head. And the aorta actually has, this is your aorta, it actually, the arch of it goes all the way down the body and divides at the left and right groin, or at the left and right leg, and then divides into a network of other arteries. And so this is how your body gets oxygenated blood. Now let's trace one single drop of blood through the heart. Don't worry, this will also be in your notes that are accompanied here with this particular module. Now, like we stated, the blood's going to come through the superior and inferior vena cava, coming back from the body, and then it's going to go into the heart. Once it hits the right atrium, it's going to go through a one-way valve called the tricuspid valve. And then it's going to go down from the atrium through that valve and then into a ventricle. Once it hits your right ventricle, then it's going to go through a pulmonary valve that's going to take it through the pulmonary arteries and into the lungs. Once it's at your lungs, it's going to cross the capillary beds, and we'll show you what this looks like. It's going to cross the capillary beds, pick up oxygen, and then after it's picked up oxygen, it's time to take it out and back to the heart so that it can get pumped out to the body. So once it gathers the oxygen, it's going to come back to the body through the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins only feed into the left atrium. Once the blood hits the left atrium, it's going to go through a bicuspid valve, also known as the mitral valve. And then once it hits the mitral valve, it's going to go down into the left ventricle, and then up through the aortic valve, and then over the aortic arch and out to the amazing body. And that's how your body gets oxygen-rich blood. Now, here's a closer look on what that looks like. You can see how blood is coming from the inferior vena cava, huge vein coming from your legs and your lower body, and the superior vena cava, which is the same huge vein, and they both come into the same chamber here. Once they dump blood into this chamber, that blood needs to go pick up oxygen, which is why it's blue. Once it dumps blood into this chamber, it's going to go into this chamber and through the tricuspid valve here. Now, this is a one-way valve, and sometimes when people have issues with this valve, blood starts backing up. Now, we'll talk about what happens when blood starts backing up when we get to common diseases and common disorders. But it's going to go through this tricuspid valve here and then down into the left ventricle. Now, the right ventricle. You have a right atrium at the top and the left atrium over here. And then you have a left ventricle and a right ventricle. A right ventricle and a left ventricle. So you have 4 chambers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Atria and ventricles are considered chambers. So once the blood comes into the right atrium, it's going to go through the tricuspid valve, down into the right ventricle, and then up through the pulmonic valve, which is a one-way valve that takes oxygen poor blood out to the lungs with the pulmonary arteries. And so this is going away from the heart and into the lungs. These guys lead to the lungs. These little fellas here, the blue ones on each side. You have right pulmonary arteries and left pulmonary arteries. They're going to the vein. They're going to the lungs. Once they hit the lungs, they're going to go through your network of capillary beds. And as you breathe in, you're going to get oxygen-rich blood, which is what this picture shows you. You're going to get oxygen-rich blood. It's going to go here, exchange with the capillary beds. You're going to get oxygen-rich blood, and it's going to come back into this left ventricle. And the same thing happens with the blood at the feet of your body. It comes back up and into, right? So you're going to have blood coming back into this ventricle. And then, it's going to come back into, this can be a little bit confusing. It's coming back into the atria and then the ventricle, okay? So this is a better picture. It's coming back from the lungs, from the pulmonary veins on both sides that are depicted red here. And they're all going to the left atrium. Once it hits the left atrium, it's going to go through a bicuspid valve or the mitral valve, which is here, down into the left ventricle, sorry. And then it's going to go up through the aortic valve, which is this little thing here, and out through the aortic arch, okay? So let's trace that again. Blood comes from the bottom half of your body through the inferior vena cava. It comes from the top half of your body from the superior vena cava. All that blood dumps right into your right atrium. Through the right atrium, it goes through the tricuspid valve, which is a one-way valve that dumps right into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it's going to go through what you have, which is called a pulmonic valve, and then it's going to go into the pulmonary arteries and out to the lungs. Once it goes to the lungs, it's going to do gas exchange, like in this diagram here. Oxygen poor blood becomes oxygen rich, and then it comes back to the heart from the lungs into the pulmonary veins. These are going to dump into the left atrium. Once the blood hits your left atrium, it only has one way to go, through the mitral valve here, or a bicuspid valve. And it goes into the left ventricle and then up through the aortic valve here, and then out through the large aortic arch, which arches behind the heart and comes all the way down the body here. So this is your descending aorta that goes all the way down, and it divides when it gets down towards your legs. Blood is made up of fluid and solids. Now, the liquid part of blood is called plasma, and it covers over half of the blood volume in your body. The solid part of blood is the blood cells, which are the white blood cells and the red blood cells, as well as the platelets. Now, you can think of platelets as the sticky stuff that helps to make your blood clot, and that really starts to give it the shape that it kind of has. Now, Red blood cells deliver oxygen to and from the tissues. White blood cells are your defenders, so they help fight off your infections, and these are the ones that go to work as soon as something foreign comes into our body, like a virus or a cold or something that we have to fight off. Hemoglobin is the oxygen carrying protein that is a part of our red blood cell structures. Now, you may also hear of something called a hematocrit. The hematocrit is simply the proportion of red blood cells to the plasma in the blood. So how many blood cells do you have versus the amount of plasma you have in your blood? Now, in your notes, you have specifics on the different types of blood values for men and women. You have them for red blood cells, white blood cells, hemoglobin, and hematocrit. Now, some common disorders for the circulatory system can happen at any time, but these are the ones that you're going to see manifest the most in people. Now, a word here about coronary artery disease. In the United States, complications with coronary artery disease or diseases stemming from the circulatory system are still the #1 cause of death, or the leading cause of complications that lead to death in the United States. So we have to be aware of the common disorders that affect our heart and that affect our circulatory system. Now, if you think about your circulatory system in terms of it being pipes versus pumps, the heart would be the pump that keeps the pipes open in the system. Now, the beautiful thing about the heart is that it is the only part of your body that can work in absence of you. Your heart would beat even without your brain telling it to. The heart can still beat. It has its own electrical conducting system and can still beat outside of the body. That is how important and how vital and how strong the human heart is. And so when we think about different types of diseases and complications that involve the circulatory system and the heart, they always happen in such a way that they either affect the pump or they affect the pipes. Now, your pipes can be your veins and your arteries. If you think about when the last time something got stopped up, or you were witness to something that got stopped up, there's usually a pipe issue. Either something's blocking the pipe. In some cases, the pipe may be too narrow. But either way, there's a pipe system. There's a pipe issue. Now, there's also been instances where there may be a pump issue, meaning that the heart itself may have issues with the muscles and you're not able to pump as best as possible. All of these different things collectively come together and are known as coronary diseases or different types of coronary disorders. And so coronary artery disease, which means blockages or things happening to the arteries that directly feed the muscle of the heart, is the #1 common disorder. These can lead to heart attacks, they can lead to stroke, they can lead to several different types of disorders. Abnormal heart rhythms and or arrhythmias, heart failure, meaning that the muscles of the heart are not as strong as they could be, or the muscles have more demand on them than they can supply, meaning that in high blood pressure, the viscosity sometimes of the blood is such that it takes more effort and more work for the heart to be able to pump. And so it creates a higher demand on the heart than the arteries and the veins that are going into the heart are able to supply it at that time. Heart valve disease, sometimes the valves can become floppy, or sometimes the nerves to those valves, something could happen to them and they simply are not working very well. The muscles surrounding the valves that help them open and shut can experience issues and cause regurgitation. Now, because our blood is so amazingly crafted, anytime blood is sitting for a certain amount of time, it automatically begins a clotting cascade, or a mechanism that happens in the body that tells the body to clot. And so for blood that's sitting in a heart that doesn't beat or that is stagnant, there are several clots that can potentially form. And then once the heart gets pumping again, like if a person gets excited or something happens, then the clot gets sent out to the rest of the body and can potentially block other pipes or other arteries and veins. Sometimes these blockages happen in the head. Sometimes they happen in the heart. If they happen in the heart, that's considered a heart attack. If it happens in the brain or the veins and arteries that lead to the brain, it can be considered a stroke or a brain attack. Congenital heart disease is also another common disorder. The pericardium is the sac that surrounds the heart to help protect it. Now, the pericardium is interesting because it's a very dense tissue structure that can't really be torn by human hands. It has to be either cut or clipped or something for it to cause any issues. But sometimes this sac surrounding the heart can still become a problem or can still have issues. And so when that happens, it's considered to be a disease of the pericardium or the pericardial sac. The aortic disease is the large arching artery that you saw. Sometimes, depending on how high the pressure of the blood is, there can be a ballooning of the aorta, or there can be a narrowing of the aorta. You can look at this as a pipe issue, meaning that as blood is leaving the heart to go out to the rest of the body, and the aorta is either narrowed, or it's blocked, or it's ballooned out, the blood is going to sit in that ballooned area and start to form clots. If it's too narrow, the heart will have to beat twice as hard to get the blood to push through the thin part of the aorta to be able to move through. And then there's vascular disease, which is disease at the level of the blood vessels or at the level of the pipes. We have several blood vessels throughout our body. And as long as we are eating the right foods and doing the things to keep our heart healthy, we're able to allow our heart to continue to pump and not be prone for these type of diseases. Now, there are several people here in the United States that have a familial or a family disposition or hereditary disposition to coronary artery diseases, to cardiac diseases, or circulatory system diseases or failure. We have to keep in mind that habits are who we become. And if the same habits are passed down from one generation to the next, it's difficult for the next generation not to also experience that disease state. So now that you know a little bit about the heart and you know some different things about how to be able to understand some of the different disorders, we have to keep in mind that we are never here as coaches to diagnose. If you see that someone has discolored fingers, perhaps, where they're not getting enough blood flow and their fingertips are blue, or if you see someone who's, has veins and you can see blockages through varicose veins, or if their feet are swollen where the blood supply or fluid is not moving properly through the body, it's not our job to diagnose what we see on our clients, right? It's our job as a coach and within our scope of practice to make certain that we express our concern and make the suggestion of the client to be able to see their primary care physician so that so that anything that's happening can get the real attention it deserves. Now, we can still take them on as clients and still help them with behavioral changes that will begin to give them a more healthier heart or put them on the road to recovering their health. But we must never diagnose them or say that we think that they have a specific kind of disease without it being our scope of practice, without it being a part of our expertise, and without being licensed to do so. Now, heart healthy foods are plentiful and very diverse. There's several foods that fuel the circulatory system and that are designed to keep it healthy. Your body is this finely tuned machine, and to keep it running in top form, we need to properly fuel it so the heart stays healthy. The best recipes to fight disease of the circulatory system include these things: beans, raw nuts and seeds, whole grains like oats and corn, tuna, salmon, tofu, soy, beans or berries, which are blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, and raspberries, carrots, leafy greens, and sweet potatoes. Now, we have to keep in mind that not only are these foods beautiful in color, but they're rich in antioxidants, which is what our heart loves to be able to have. So things like red bell peppers, oranges, melon, tomatoes, delicious dark chocolate, and even loose leaf teas. Now here I want to say a word about teas. Loose leaf teas, as often as possible, should be purchased organic. We should make sure that when we're drinking tea, that we try at all costs to avoid bagged tea, meaning that the tea that is in the bags, 100% of bagged teas are not washed. They are harvested, they are smoked or roasted, or however the tea process happens for that particular brand. And then they are bagged, boxed, and sold. So it's important not to use tea bags that are loaded with pesticides, dirt from other things where it grew, and loaded with things that are in your tea and placed in hot water to then begin to have as a drink. So we have to be very, very cautious of the things that we're eating and that we're putting into our system to help get our heart and circulatory system healthy. Now let's take a dive into the respiratory system. Love the respiratory system because breath in the body is life. The heart beats, yes, but breath is life. The respiratory system is all the organs involved in our breathing. These organs include the nose, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs. And it helps to bring oxygen properly, and it helps us get rid of carbon dioxide. So it helps to bring oxygen to the body and help us get rid of what we don't need in which is carbon dioxide. Now, the air we breathe in only contains, out of 100%, the air we breathe in only has 21% oxygen measured. The rest of room air has about 70+% nitrogen, and then the rest are just trace gases. So the nose, the pharynx, the larynx, and the trachea and the bronchi all work like a system of pipes through which the air is funneled down into the lungs. And there is in a very small air sac called the alveoli, oxygen is brought into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide is pushed from the blood and then out into the air. So let's trace really quick a breath through the respiratory system. So air is going to come through your mouth or your nose, and then it's going to go through the larynx, the pharynx, which is the back wall of the throat, and then it's going to go down through the larynx, through your vocal cords, and down into your trachea, which is also known as your windpipe. It's the thing you can touch and push on in your neck with the cartilage rings. Take a moment to touch your trachea now. You should be able to move it back and forth slightly. And if you roll your fingers up and down the middle of your neck and your throat, you can actually feel the cartilage rings on your trachea. Right underneath your chin and the bone of your mandible, you can feel the top of your trachea, which is your larynx. And you can feel the bones in the trachea if you rock them back and forth from left to right. You should be able to feel them. Now, as we're tracing this breath through the system, you can see how breath either comes through your nasal cavity, and through the cavity is where room air, is warmed and moisturized, and then it goes down through the back of the throat from the pharynx down into the larynx where the cords are, and then down into your windpipe, and then down into the lungs. Now, once it gets to the bronchial tubes, which are these guys on the left and right bronchus, then it goes down and it keeps dividing and dividing and dividing until it divides into all of these tiny little air sacs called alveoli. Now, wrapped around these sacs are amazing networks of arteries and veins where blood comes in, carbon dioxide gets into the blue side, and it goes back up through the superior and inferior vena cava. Remember those? And then oxygen-rich blood, after it picks up oxygen here, it goes back to the heart through the aorta and out to the body so that the body can constantly get oxygen-rich blood. And this process is happening for you all day, every day. Now, the average respiratory rate is anywhere from 7 to 20 breaths a minute. Some sources may say anywhere from 8 to 20 breaths a minute. How many times do you breathe per minute? Take a moment and time yourself to see how many breaths you are breathing per minute. I personally breathe between 6 to 8 breaths per minute. My breath is really slow. Some people breathe a lot faster. Let's talk a little bit about how the respiratory system works. Now, air is going to enter your lungs through the system of pipes called the bronchi, one goes on the left and one is on the right. Now, these pipes start from the bottom of the trachea and they cut off to the left and the right and become the left and right bronchi. And then they continue to branch off further all the way till they become these tiny sacs called the alveoli. Now, the alveoli are where all the important work of gas and exchange takes place between the air and your blood. Now, let's talk a little bit about newborns and development of the actual system. Now, when it comes to being a newborn baby, when a baby is born, they have to convert from getting all their oxygen through the placenta to absorbing oxygen through the lung. This is a complicated process sometimes, and it can involve many changes in both air and blood pressures in the baby's lungs. For the baby born premature, that is before 37 weeks gestation, the change is even harder. And this is because the baby's lungs may not be mature enough to cope with the transition. Now, lungs start to develop between 28 and 32 weeks. So literally, if a baby is born before that time, the bun in the oven is really not done yet. And so there can be work of breathing commonly for babies that are premature. Work of breathing is usually the leading cause of complications in premature birth, along with other birth defects as well. Now, the major problem with the preterm baby's lungs is a lack of something called surfactant. Now, this is a substance produced by the cells in the lungs that help to keep the air sacs or the alveoli popped open. Without surfactant, the pressures in the lungs change and the small, tiny air sacs, the alveoli, begin to collapse, and it makes it difficult for the baby to hold air in and breathe. This reduces the area across which oxygen and carbon dioxide can be exchanged, meaning that as blood goes to the lungs, there's not air in the alveoli to be able to exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen. Normally, the baby can begin producing the surfactant between 28 and 32 weeks. But if they're born prematurely, they don't have an opportunity to make this surfactant while they're in the mommy's belly. So when a baby is born before or around this age, it may not have enough surfactant to keep its lungs open. And that's what causes the work of breathing or the difficulty breathing for newborn babies. The baby may develop something called neonatal respiratory distress syndrome, or NRDS. And signs of NRDS include tachypnea, or breathing very, very fast, or cyanosis, or grunting, which comes from having blue fingers or blue lips and a blue tongue. Sometimes this particular disorder can be treated by giving the baby artificial surfactant, which you can put down the tube that's in the baby's lungs, and to just give the surfactant straight to the lungs that way. Now, some common disorders of the respiratory system are the following. Besides the fact that the compliance or the sponginess of the chest wall decreases, and that makes it more difficult for people to breathe as they age, and the fact that the strength of the respiratory muscles, the diaphragm, and the intercostal muscles between the ribs that help to pull the rib cage up and out when you breathe, when these muscles don't develop properly, or as we age they don't stay as strong, they can cause issues with breathing over time. Some other common disorders are asthma, COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, chronic bronchitis, sickle cell side effects, pneumonia, and, as we've seen in babies, alveoli collapse as well. Now, sickle cell side effects can be more detrimental than many of these other disorders. Individuals with sickle cells have cells, their blood cells are sickle shaped, meaning that instead of their blood cells being round and beautiful and supple, their blood cells are shaped in sickle form, or in the shape of a crescent moon. If you think about how your blood flows through your capillaries, through your veins, and through the arteries, and how smooth, round, beautiful, supple blood cells can float straight through all of your pipes, which are your arteries and veins, to get to all parts of your body. Now imagine those being shaped like crescent moons and how they'll be resistive to flow. The tips of the crescent-shaped cell get caught up and blood becomes stagnant. They are prone to clots. They don't get as much blood flow to their extremities, which makes them prone to decreased blood flow and can also make them feel very, very cold. Now, it's important that when you have someone with this type of disorder, if they're transitioning, that you make sure that you're safe and not do anything that will cause a sickle crisis, a sickle crisis. A sickle cell crisis always requires hospitalization and complete blood transfusion sometimes, where the entire volume of the person's body is exchanged out. It can take days in the hospital and even longer for sickle cell sufferers to be able to recuperate. Now, one of the things we also want to be aware of is the fact that when it comes to people with sickle cell and sometimes other resistant to flow disease processes, we want to be careful to give them things that promote blood flow, like warming foods. And so it may not be beneficial to put them on a smoothie cleanse. something cold to the body may constrict them further. So we have to be aware of that as well. We have to be mindful of how we customize things for our clients. And it's important that we do just that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the food. The foods for the respiratory system are numerous and plentiful, and you can find several sources about which foods are the best for the respiratory system, but some of the greatest ones are listed right here. Things like green tea, which are there to help all the foreign matter out of the respiratory tract, the sinuses and lungs. You can drink hot liquids to get these things moving. Hot liquids such as green tea is one way to get the cilia, which helps to expel and move mucus out of the body, to get them moving again. This in turn can help the person rid themselves of mucus. Nuts and seeds have vitamin E and may help your airways and reduce inflammation. Vitamin E is a powerful antioxidant, and it's great for the immune system that helps to protect and repair damaged tissue and damaged lung tissue and aids in red blood cell formation. This also increases your ability to carry oxygen in the body properly. Carrots are also another great option. They're not listed, but all other red, orange, and yellow fruits and veggies, these contain beta carotene. Now, the beta carotene helps to decrease things like asthma. Your body converts the beta carotene to vitamin A, and then this is an essential nutrient, but beta carotene has antioxidant properties that can help ward off all types of cell damage. Things like papaya and collard greens and cantaloupe are also high in vitamin A and can help repair damaged lung tissue. Oranges also contain vitamin C along with papaya and can help your lungs heal properly. Other rich sources of vitamin C include things like kiwi, parsley, celery, watermelon, and citrus fruits. Now, be sure to refer to your notes for several different kinds of healing modalities and foods for the respiratory system. Also, keep in mind that magnesium relaxes the muscles in the airways and helps more air get through. So dried figs, bananas, brown rice, prunes, beans are all just a few of the magnesium-rich foods on the planet that we can partake of. It has been said that 70% of the toxins we ingest daily can be liberated from a good respiratory process. Now, a good respiratory process is also, or can be also be called breath work. Now, there is something called the rule of 4 breathing. And the rule of 4 breathing is a way to initially start deep breathing so that you can begin to get clear on the different things that you want to be a part of. Now, it has been said that when we hold our breath is when we receive the most information about our lives, who we are, and why we're here. Now, the way that you do that is you can hold either your left or your right nostril closed, and you can breathe in through the open nostril for a count of 4 seconds. You then hold and close both nostrils. While the nostrils are closed, you hold your breath for a count of 4. Now, this is the first void where you can start to get information. Even though it's a short period of time, only 4 seconds, you can still begin to start hearing information and understanding yourself spiritually, because that is the point where everything in the body is still and quiet. After holding the breath for 4 seconds, open the opposite nostril that you initially breathed in and slowly let the air out over a count of 4 seconds. Now, once you've completely exhaled, go ahead and hold your breath again for a count of 4 seconds. This is the second void. So as you breathe all the way in and hold your breath, and then as you breathe all the way out and hold your breath, these are two periods of void that can be extended. So you may hold your breath for a count of 4, and then you may hold it for a count of 8, and then a count of 16, and then a count of 32 seconds, and on and so forth and so forth. The longer this void is, the quicker it is to access the other different bodies that you have that we'll talk about in a moment, and the quicker it is for you to be able to get downloads to be able to come through you from a spiritual perspective. Now let's go ahead and start talking about the lymphatic system. Now the lymphatic system is a network of tissues and organs as well, and it helps to rid the body of toxins, waste, and other unwanted materials. It transports lymph, a fluid, throughout the body and makes sure that it's able to rid your body of all the different toxins that it simply doesn't need. Now, the lymphatic system consists of the lymphatic vessels, which are similar to the circulatory system's veins and capillaries. The vessels are connected to lymph nodes where the lymph is filtered, like the tonsils, the adenoids, which are also at the back of the throat, the spleen, the thymus gland, and these are all parts of the lymphatic system. Now, the word lymph comes from the Latin word lympha, which means connected to water. There are hundreds of lymph nodes in the human body, and they are all located deep inside the body tissues, and they're around the lungs and the heart, and even closer to the surface, such as right under the arms in the armpit, and then gatherings of lymph nodes in the groin. Now, for people that end up getting some lymph nodes removed, the goal is to understand that that part of the body where they've had the lymph nodes removed can be prone to infection because the lymph nodes are there to rid the body of anything that might cause infection. So the thymus gland stores immature lymphocytes. We also call these T cells. And these are the cells that become active that help destroy any types of infectious or cancerous cells. The lymph nodes are found from the head to all the way around the knee area. The spleen is located on the left side of the body, just above the kidney, right? And you'll see that about here, just above the kidney. And it is the largest lymphatic organ. The spleen acts as a blood filter. It controls the amount of red blood cells and blood storage in the body and helps to fight infection. If the spleen has a problem, or if there's an issue and the spleen detects something potentially dangerous in the body, the viruses or other things that are being detected in the blood, it creates white blood cells called the lymphocytes, which act as defenders against invaders. So the lymphocytes produce these antibodies to kill whatever foreign organism is in the body, and it stops the infection from spreading to other parts of the body and causing an even bigger problem. Humans can live without a spleen, although people who have lost their spleen to disease or injury are definitely more prone to infection. This is literally the center of where your body starts to communicate and fight off infections. Now, the thymus gland is located in the chest just above the heart. And you will find that the small organ stores immature lymphocytes called the T cells, and they help to destroy anything that's infected. The tonsils are these large clusters of lymphatic cells found in the pharynx or in the back of the throat. They're literally the first line of defense for the immune system and the things we ingest into our mouths. They sometimes become infected, and although taking the tonsils out occurs much less frequently than it did back in the 1950s, it's still among the most common operations performed and typically follows frequent throat infections. Plasma leaves the body cells once it has delivered its nutrients and removed debris. Most of the fluid returns to the venous circulation through these tiny blood vessels called these venules, and then it continues as venous blood. The remainder becomes lymph. Unlike blood, which flows throughout the body in a continued loop using the heart as a pump, lymph flows in only one direction, up towards the neck. Lymphatic vessels connect to two subclavian veins, which are located at either side of the neck and near the collarbones. You have the left subclavian trunk here, next to the left jugular trunk, and you'll have the right subclavian trunk next to the right lymphatic duct, okay? So you'll be able to see both sides of where the lymph fluid flows back up towards the neck. Now, this is where everything re-enters the body's circulation. Now, the foods that are beautiful for the lymphatic system are several in number as well, but there are certain things that we want to make sure that we keep in our arsenal. Now, the lymphatic system, we have to understand that gravitational pull and moving around and lymphatic massages and different things that happen to the body are what keeps the lymphatic fluid moving. Now, the lymphatic system itself doesn't have a pump, so we have to do things to our body to keep lymph fluid moving. One of the easiest things to do would be to dance or to jump up and down. This helps to get lymph fluid moving continuously throughout the body so that we can start to move toxins, we can continue to move toxins out. Jumping on a trampoline or a rebounder can be extremely beneficial to a detox. And that is because the lymphatic system it begins to work properly and can move toxins out during the detoxing or fasting period. Now, the types of foods that are perfect for the lymphatic system, number one on the list is water, because lymph is attracted to fluid and it needs fluid to be able to move toxins out of the body. Cranberry juice, in addition to leafy greens, nuts and seeds, adaptogenic herbs like ginseng and holy basil, garlic, ginger, turmeric, seaweed, and citrus are among the top foods that are necessary to keep in your arsenal for the lymphatic system. And last but not least, we don't want to forget the soul. Remember, we discussed earlier in the module about the different types of bodies we have. Well, we definitely have more than one body, and we're going to discuss that now. When it comes to many disorders in the body, they can stem from a deeper issue, something that is not physical. The chakras, if you're not aware, are energy centers that are strategically placed throughout the subtle body or throughout the other bodies. They govern organ systems and they govern functions of these systems. It has been said that 98% of all disease stems from a spiritual or subtle body place first. And then if it's not corrected, it manifests in the physical body. Now, we have to be aware of the fact that even though we can't really, we may not have trained our eyes to see our subtle bodies still exist. They are there. The fourth chakra is what governs the heart. It is called the heart chakra. And out of the 7 main chakras of the body, the heart chakra sits at the center. So there are 3 lower chakras and 3 higher chakras And the heart chakra sits in the middle of those. It governs the heart, the circulatory system, the blood, lungs, the diaphragm, the thymus, which governs the lymphatic system, and the breasts. Some things that represent healing or can help with healing of these systems are things that are green, rose, and pink colors. The chakra is represented by the color of pink or the color of green. And so one of the things we have to know is that it is known as the center of the entire chakra system. And when it comes to physical imbalances of this particular chakra, it can lead to blood vessel diseases or blood diseases, upper back pain, compromised immune system, because that's our lymphatic and thymus system, lung issues and difficulty breathing, problems with the breath and problems with being able to catch our breath, breast cancer, etc. So it can lead to all of these different things when there's something blocked at the heart level. Now, even though blockages can occur in the chakra system or the spiritual center, the subtle body system, even though imbalances can occur there, unlike other places of the body, it is very difficult for people to attach things or parts of them to your heart chakra. So for instance, all the time you're sharing time and space with people at work or at home, in your communities, among friends, among family, you're always moving and sharing energy back and forth with people. Energy is just naturally bouncing off. So there really is no place where you start and I stop, or where I end and you begin. And so because of this, people constantly are connecting spiritually to one another, even without coming in physical contact with one another. Scary, right? And so one of the things we have to be aware of is the people that we are around, the places that we frequent. If we want to be in a place where our vibrational energy our vibrational energy raises and stays high, we have to be in the space of people that have those high vibes, because the energy is constantly moving and bouncing off of us anyway. And likewise, we have to stay from around people whose energy is not positive, or they're vibrating in a low space. It makes us very prone to pulling in their energy and allowing their energy to affect who we are and what our goals are for our lives. The beautiful thing is that when energy is attached to us at any part of our body, the heart is the one space that nothing can ever attach to. And because of that, things that are attached at other parts of our bodies can be transmuted through the heart and changed into something else. Now let's take a quick look at our subtle bodies before we cover the homework. The subtle bodies are, or the 7 bodies that we have, number 1 is the physical body. And this is the one that manifests everything that's going on with all the other bodies. It is the smallest body and the least significant body. We have the etheric body, the astral or emotional body, and sometimes we can feel these subtle bodies. For instance, if you let your hand hover above or over your arm as if you're going to grab your arm, you can feel the heat. That is your ability to be able to feel a little bit of your astral or your emotional body. These bodies blend together seamlessly, and there's residue of the adjoining body on each one of the bodies. For instance, you can feel pain, heat, cold. You can feel these sensations at the physical level. Because there's residue of the physical body on the etheric and or the emotional and etheric body, you can feel heat when someone walks up behind you. You can feel them standing there. You can feel someone staring at you. You can feel things in your other bodies too, because there's residue from your physical body in these other bodies as well. Now, we're just scratching the surface on this, but one of the things we have to understand is that these other bodies govern who we really are. And these bodies dictate what our physical body looks like. So when we change our energy and change the way we feel in our etheric, emotional, causal, mental, spiritual, or Buddhic or Christic body, when we begin to change those things, then we're at a place where our physical body will show that, where our physical body will begin to exhibit that, where everything in the physical body will move, think, act, speak, and look in a way that reflects what's in the soul, what's inside of the other subtle bodies. This is why it is so beautiful that even when something in the physical body isn't right, or it's not working, like, in the sense of a disease process or a part of the body that no longer functions, if we can tap into how to fix it in one of these subtle bodies, then we can fix it at this physical body. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. Increasing confidence, collapsing timelines to success. All of these things are inside of the other bodies. I encourage you to explore what each of these means and what they mean to you on this journey over the next year. I want you, as you learn about the different systems of the body, each of them are governed by a spiritual part of you, a part that is unseen. And we'll be discussing that with every single body system so that you understand how these pieces fit together to holistically go on your own journey and to be able to consistently help clients as well. Now for the homework, after you've done your first 5 Kickstart consultations, be sure to set up your next 5 consultations. You can post inside of the Legacy Health Coach Haven, or you can begin to connect with other students privately to see if someone will be able to do more of your health history consultations or your Kickstart consultations. The goal is to get these out of the way so that you boost your confidence in being able to do these consultations. Okay? I hope you've enjoyed this module.